It's a good idea to avoid making mistakes that English learners all over the world keep making over and over again. And here are 5 of the most common mistakes. The first is the word order after the words what, who, when, and other words that can be question words in questions, and also the conjunctions. So when we use these words as question words, we obviously introduce a question with them. And after that, we have to have the question word order. For example, who are you talking to? Or when did you relocate to the US? But very often these words are also used as the conjunctions in complex sentences, and in these cases we have to keep the simple word order, not the question word order. For example, Mary didn't tell me who she had seen in the park. Or Sarah doesn't know when her mother comes back from a business trip. In these 2 sentences you can see simple word order after who and when. And a lot of English learners will say, Mary didn't tell me who had she seen in the park, or Sarah doesn't know when does her mother come back from a business trip. So keep in mind that when there is no question mark in the end of the sentence, we need to use the simple word order in the sentence. The second problem is use of articles in English. And this is the problem not only for beginners. A lot of C1, C2 language speakers, language learners will also make this mistake. Sometimes omitting the article where it has to be used or using it wrongly will not hurt you much and people will still understand you. But there are some rules that you have to remember, and in these cases you have to use proper articles. First of all, with jobs and professions you will have to use a or an articles. Like I'm an engineer or he is an English teacher. Then there are public places and we use the with these public places. For example, she's at the library. When there is a generalization, so we use a noun to refer to any object of the kind, we don't use any articles at all. For example, students never like learning grammar. Students, we don't use any article here because it's a generalization. Then there are superlative adjectives, and with the superlative adjectives we usually use the in 99% of cases. For example, in my opinion, she's the best English teacher in that school. The best English teacher. There are plenty of rules that you have to know about articles, and you will need to learn them to speak fluently. And the third popular mistake is keeping the s ending in present simple questions and sometimes negatives. The problem is that in present simple we use the ending s in the third person singular, like he works as a doctor. But when we ask questions we use the auxiliary verb does, and it already has this ending, and we don't need to add another ending to the verb itself. We say he works as a doctor, but we say does he work as a doctor, and a lot of beginner learners will make this mistake. They say does he works as a doctor. Just keep in mind that in questions and negatives in present simple we don't use the ending s in the verb. Then the fourth very common mistake is mixing the meaning of adjectives ending with ed and ing. They are formed from the same word, but they have absolutely different meanings. For example, you can be bored and you can be boring, and these words have absolutely different meaning. If you say I'm bored, it means that you're bored by someone. But if you say I'm boring, it means that someone is bored by you. Sometimes when you mix the meanings of these adjectives with ed and ing endings, it may lead to some embarrassing situations. Here are some examples. I was so boring during the English lesson. In this case, you say that you were boring, so everyone was bored by you during the English lesson. You obviously wanted to say, I was so bored during that English lesson. They offered me a job and I'm very interesting. In this case, you say you are interesting, so you are interesting for someone, but you wanted to say they offered me a job and I am very interested. The fifth problem is using incorrect prepositions. The rules of using prepositions in English are complete hell for beginners and even for intermediate learners, because they are not of common sense for learners. They don't correspond to the prepositions in your own language. And when you start learning, especially phrasal verbs or the verbs that require a certain preposition after that, like agree with, for example, sometimes it's not exactly the same as in your native language, and it makes you use other prepositions, and sometimes it can be even misleading. There are obvious situations like wait for, I'm waiting for the bus, agree with, I don't agree with you, look at, I'm looking at the Statue of Liberty right now. But there are way more complicated rules, and I'm not even talking about the phrasal verbs. Let's make some examples. Our train didn't arrive in time. It should be on time. I have lived in Spain from 2007. It's not from, it's since. My job interview is in Friday or at Friday. It's not correct. It should be on Friday. In last week or on last week, I had a job interview. The correct option is just last week, without any preposition. I live at that building. It's in. And if you say at that building, it means that you live near that building. I'll go there in the bus. It should be by bus. I'll certainly be making a lot of videos about prepositions, so if you want to know more, subscribe to the channel.